Yeah, hi, welcome once more to the final session this evening of the VegFest UK Online January 30th, 31st weekend of 2021. It's been a fabulous session of live streams, both Saturday and Sunday. We've really been blessed with some real quality actually this weekend, and of course joined by people from around the globe, which has really made it exciting. So we're in the middle of a pandemic still, on lockdown, but that hasn't stopped. A lot of great activity, a lot of good discussion. This weekend particularly, we've been focusing a bit on activism. That's been really interesting. All of these are available on the vegfest.co.uk website. You can go back there for any time. There's some live streams going back quite a while, presentations, and great resources. Do feel free to share them if you want. You know, they're good resources, they're free to share, and hopefully just be a bit of inspiration, a bit of motivation, or just a good entertainment, something good to listen to, a bit different from the mainstream media narrative or whatever it is that's so called these days. So here we go. So this evening's session, we're going to be joining in once more with Animal Rebellion. And Animal Rebellion, of course, is a pretty much activist group that encompasses the globe now. There's groups of Animal Rebellion that are active all over the world. And we've been lucky enough to be able to tune in with a few recently over the last sort of year or so from the online events. So we're going to have a little session tonight. I'm going to introduce our host first of all, which is Philip. Philip, I'm just going to read this off. So if I'm looking away, Philip Murphy. Philip is going to serve in a moderator's role for the Animal Rebellion panel, a co-founder of Animal Rebellion in New York City. Philip also serves in a continental liaison role for North America at the organisation. So Philip is, from New York. He's founded this, co-founded with the Animal Rebellion, does a lot of work there. And Philip's going to co-host this, or actually host the whole panel. So Philip, we're going to bring you in. Thanks ever so much for joining us again. You've been really staunch with our online activities since all this palaver began. How are you keeping, Philip? How's things?
Doing well here in the New York City area. Thanks. And thanks for having us, Tim. You've been a big champion for Animal Rebellion, and we really do appreciate that.
Well, we love it. We were happy to host Animal Rebellion way back, in the early days. In fact, before it even really began, actually, sort of roots of it. So that's great. So we've got a kind of history of being supportive with Animal Rebellion. But to be honest, we find Animal Rebellion also really inspirational because we get a little snapshot of what's happening around the globe, what current thought is, what current obstacles there are sometimes. We heard this morning from Sir Mohammed in Morocco and from Nella in Athens, Greece, about some of the things there. We've been a really interesting panel with some colleagues of yours from New York, actually. Omawali Adewale talking about some of those things there and some of the brothers there. But Philip, you're going to be hosting tonight's panel. You've got some illustrious and esteemed guests to join us. And you are going to have the pleasure and the privilege of introducing them. So with that, I shall hand over to you and pop back in about an hour. I'll be sitting lurking in the background listening. If anybody wants to ask any questions, you're very welcome. Put them in the comments section. We'll either address them now or afterwards, of course, on Facebook. Easy done. Philip Murphy, please take us away, sir.
Thanks again, Tim. We do have honored to have members of Animal Rebellion from around the globe to join us in a conversation that's going to be framed about Animal Rebellion activism. Answer a couple questions, and then for each of the panelists, we'll answer two pre-prepared questions, and then we're going to encourage a dialogue among the members on the topics that come up from these questions. So if I can get a look at who's with us here, that would be great. There's my New York City colleague, Eloisa, Soren, Alyssa, Annalisa, Harley, and Simon, joining from around the globe. So to get started, why don't we just have folks introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll jump into the questions. So why don't we start with Eloisa, and we'll just go around the horn from there.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eloisa. I'm calling in from New York City and part of the Animal Rebellion team here. I'm also co-founder of Vegan Activist Alliance and involved in quite a bit of other groups. I do food justice work through Chili Stone Wheels here in New York as well. Been vegan, I don't know, I guess I'm a lifelong vegan at this point, so quite a long time.
Thanks, Eloisa. Could we hear from Simon?
I had to unmute me. I'm sorry. Yeah, hi. I'm Simon from Munich, Germany, and yeah, I'm with Animal Rebellion for, I guess, 1 year and something. But I'm involved in different other animal rights groups, so it's kind of interesting to mix it all together with Animal Rebellion, I guess. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Simon. Alyssa, please.
Hi, I'm Elisa, and I'm currently calling from Saskatchewan, Canada, Turtle Island. And my activism has been in Animal Rebellion to try to launch it here in Canada. I am also involved in other organizations, and we're trying to start, for example, in Canada, a plant-based transition coalition. And I'm also involved in as a co-founder of Vegan Option Canada.
Thank you, Elisa. Annalisa, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Annalisa. I'm from Animal Rebellion Netherlands. I'm originally from Germany, so you will probably hear that accent. And I'm currently based in The Hague. That's where I'm calling in from. I've been involved with activism for the past 2 years, and I've been with Animal Rebellion Netherlands since the beginning of last year, especially active in the media and action team. And I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks. And Elisa and Harley, please.
Sorry, I just got really excited when Eloisa talked because I love VAA and Chili's on Wheels, so that was like so exciting for me. I'm Harley. I'm in Manchester, UK, so I'm in the Animal Rebellion National UK team. I do work in strategy and messaging primarily, but also arts and actions. I've been working in animal justice for about 4 years back in Australia, where I'm from, and I've co-founded some stuff and was involved in a lot of animal justice stuff, and then moved to the UK in January last year to volunteer full-time with Animal Rebellion, and I've been doing that pretty much ever since. So I'm very lucky, and it's extremely, amazing. So I'm really happy to be here. And yeah, back to you, Phil.
Thank you, everyone. So just by way of a broad framing, for the audience, want to mention the fact that if you're not familiar with Animal Rebellion, global animal justice and environmental justice organization with a focus on nonviolent direct action, which for many reasons, most notably the pandemic, is very challenging right now. But the unique element of kind of holding these two pieces has informed our questions, particularly the first question, fairly unique. So I'm just going to read a brief passage and then pose the question to the group, and we'll go around the horn again. So the full articulation of Animal Rebellion's first value reads as follows: we are an anti-speciesist movement that has a shared vision of change. It goes on creating a world that protects beings of all species for generations to come, and further on in relation to our movement's culture. We're inspired not only by human action, but also animal resistance, and we believe in co-creating a world with individuals from all species for a just and secure future. So with that, there's also a primary demand for a just and sustainable plant-based food system. So there can be my experiences can be a tension between those two imperatives. So the question reads, how do we see the relationship? How do you see the relationship between the animal justice and environmental justice mandates of Animal Rebellion? And how is your holding of these mandates simultaneously reflected in your activism? So I'm going to go in the same order as the intro. So we'll start with Eloisa, please.
Oh, I get the pleasure. I'm still processing the question. It's sort of a two-part. It could be more than a two-part question. But I think I'll simply start off by saying that, you know, if we're looking to for justice for more than human persons, right, who we know as animals, we have to include every being in there. So when we speak about environmental justice, when we speak about justice for animals, it includes all beings. And during this pandemic, I think it has been the great revealer and exposing the inequities that already existed. And I think that for those of us who work sort of at the intersection of human rights and animal rights, it wasn't a surprise to us. It was challenging just because it's hard to see, it's hard to process, especially for people such as myself who are Afro-Indigenous or, you know, are Afro-descendants or any Indigenous person anywhere in the world, any Black person. And so, you know, I think one thing, you know, regarding speciesism, and I think at least for me, I come from a very anti-colonial perspective. And so, you know, I'm not looking at speciesism sort of just, you know, yes, we are all speciesists, right? We're all born into this global culture of exploiting others and exploiting animals. However, when we look at colonization, you know, we can really see how that break in empathy towards others was promoted even further. And I'm not sure if that answers the question. I think I got away from the question, but I think, you know, I apply this in every day. I think my existence in just living and doing the work that I do and understanding that we are all interconnected and that if we want animal liberation, and we cannot separate things, we don't live in a vacuum. Everything is interconnected. We are part of the natural world. We're not separate from the natural world. We're not separate from the environment, and neither are animals. You know, we think a lot of farmed animals, right? Animals who are farmed. And we, even as animal rights activists, sort of put them in this othering status, in this other status. And to me, that's a disadvantage because they are also part of that natural world. And I think everything that we do has to come from a holistic perspective of we are interconnected. What we have done before affects the present, and what we do here is going to affect the future. So the idea that somehow we can divide that, you know, and you look at conservation, right? The idea of conservation is also a very sort of Western idea that colonizers brought in, but people are part of their environment. So when Indigenous people are living in a forest and somebody comes from the outside and says, well, we have to preserve these lions and now you have to leave. And, you know, people who live there are like, the lions are not separate from us. The tigers are not separate from us. They are part of us. And so I think just my existence and the work that I do trying to bridge that gap with food justice specifically is one of the ways that I address that.
Thanks, Eloisa. Just briefly, I'd be curious, you do such amazing food justice work with Chilies on Wheels, which if people don't know about it, it's just one of the greatest organizations going, chiliesonwheels.org. In that work, does the anti-speciesist message or this kind of broader social justice, are you able to bring it in, or is there resistance? Or just briefly, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but just knowing knowing as I do how deep, you know, your engagement is in the food justice world. I'd be interested to hear just a bit about that.
Right. So one of the interesting things is that when you come with food, it's a much different conversation, right? And so I think food really brings us together, just sharing. And, you know, our perspective and our approach is mutual aid. And we see mutual aid as a way as liberation praxis. And we don't get any pushback. I mean, from the people who are receiving, and a lot of those people also give back. So it isn't charity, it's definitely mutual aid. A lot of them may already be vegan, maybe interested in veganism, and even if they're not, they're open to hearing the information. So we always provide, we're a vegan organization for the animals, for everything, for the environment, for the people. So that education is always there. Chili's on Wheels co-founder Michelle Carrera also co-founded a micro sanctuary. She rescues, and we're all involved in that work. And I think sometimes from the vegan perspective, they're like, oh, you're just helping other humans who are eating animals anyway, not realizing that this is a different approach. But no, we have not gotten any pushback from the people. I think from other people who may work in food justice, perhaps they may look at things as just calorie density, right? So you're providing this many calories, you should also include animals in there. We don't see animals as food. And so we are trying to provide our communities and our people with the healthiest food possible. And so that's what we're doing, you know, and that's what they want. During the pandemic, it was just absolutely disgusting the way the state, the city, and the federal government handled feeding people. People who are in need also deserve a choice. They also have their ethical guidelines that they want to abide by. They also have their health that they want to, you know, abide by and whatnot. And I think that it's a disservice when food justice advocates may look at food justice advocates as perhaps pushing an agenda, because most of us are BIPOC people. We are Black and Indigenous people, realizing that what our communities are receiving is detrimental to their health, is obviously terrible for the immediate victims, who are the animals, and is bad for the environment. So there has been maybe historically some pushback from vegans who don't understand that we need different approaches in this work, and maybe food justice advocates. But overall, I think, especially now within the pandemic, people understand even more, I think, the work that we're doing. But it's always welcome from the people who we're directly interacting with.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Eloisa. Elisa, I know you also do a tremendous amount of work with food justice in Canada, so definitely interested in hearing your perspectives on holding that, what can be a tension between the anti-speciesist and really pushing for the plant-based food system. If any comments you could share would be great.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry. No amount of practicing and just doing meetings online trains you to unmute. So yeah, I think it's the intersection between climate justice and animal justice is not only necessary for activists to understand the connection, but it's also well needed in the general, I would say, landscape today. I think that the way we organize, I know I'm a bit going on a tangential point, but it's something, it seems very important in terms of what I see here on the ground. I think that more and more, like, we're suffering at the mass scale, as Eloisa was saying. The suffering is multidimensional. It's shared, and it's human suffering is not disconnected to animal suffering and environmental. When we talk about the environment, it's quote unquote what people call nature, but it's also how we relate to each other and how we can be healthy in this overall environment. And I think that in these times, particularly, but it's always been the case, activism has often been very singled issue, and in a way that people think that their mission is not only the right one, but the only good one. Like most suffering happens in quote unquote X, Y, Z movement, right? Like every movement thinks they have the view of what should be changed. And I think it's really radical to my thinking to bring together the human social justice issues as well with the environmental and the animal suffering. In a way, it helps depolarize ourselves, right? And it helps understand that there is a part of truth and reality, and that all suffering matters. So I think it's good in a way that it takes away this, and I think this is good, right? Because we, as humans, and we tend to compartmentalize when we think of issues and when we think in general. It's just the way our brains are made. But I think it's good to be able to have a hand a little further, always a little further. And I think this will build bridges and help. Here, I would say the animal activist movement in Canada is very, very centered on animals, which is awesome, right? Because animals don't have a voice in this pandemic, although they're mass called and just in general in daily life. But I think the power of bringing environmental justice too is that it kind of pushes us as animal activists to understand, well, even animals, the way in which we raise animals has disastrous impacts, irreversible impacts on the earth, and on the earth means on everyone, on every sentient being. So that, to make that connection. And as another point, in terms of my activism, I think that the pandemic has helped has helped us to go and study and go maybe outside of our comfort zone in terms of what we think we know. And one thing I've learned was about the ecology of change. There's lots of tensions on the ground. I can't talk for other countries, but here in Turtle Island, Canada, lots of tensions about what's the right way, right, to do activism. And animal rebellion is seen as a social, like, system change, right? We were trying to work on system change, but then discussion arises about, well, individual change is better, or no, we need alternatives, or we need to change our democracy or whatnot, and kind of dismissing, saying which one is the best one. And I think with the movement ecology, and which is something that I think Animal Rebellion tries to learn and share, is that all of those are part of what we need to bring change in a sustainable and resilient and inclusive way. And it's to work with the other movements that have those other strategies, but they're not bad or good. They're just complementary. So I would maybe end with that for this time. Thanks.
Sorry, thanks. I've got a house full of dogs and they were barking, so I muted 5 greyhounds. Simon, could we hear from you, please?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I want to say, yeah, I definitely agree with that, what Eloisa, is that right, said about that everything is interconnected and we're just one part and animals are another part and plants are another part and whatever of this world. But I feel for Animal Rebellion, at least around my home, we are the place where this is connected. So I've known some activists from groups who care just about the environment issue and are talking about climate justice, but don't care at all about animals. They're eating meat and they not even think about it. And on the other hand, I've known activists who just care about the animals and don't care about climate at all, or even about people at all, and don't care about the workers who work in factory farms and whatever, and they just care about the animals. And for me, it feels like with Animal Rebellion, we can definitely combine these two or even more parts of it. And yeah, we tried to do that. For example, there was we had an action in front of Brazil's embassy against fires in the Amazon rainforest and against Bolsonaro's politics. So, and people from all sides came there because they know, okay, we can help the animals right there, we can help the Amazon right there, and we can plant trees or whatever and help environment right there. And so everything was combined, and that was because of Animal Rebellion. There are many people from Extinction Rebellion, from Anonymous for the Voiceless, for example. People came together and had this shared vision and the shared goal. So I think also globally, Animal Rebellion can jump in this gap, which I see right there, to combine all these forces, which we will need in the future to handle these problems. I think that's it from my side.
Thanks so much, Simon. Annalisa, could we hear from you, please?
Yes, sure. First of all, I would like to say that's very interesting to hear what the others are saying, and also to hear about this action that Simon is describing, where basically different movements are brought together. And I think that's also at least like our strategy for this year, because together we're just stronger and have a much, much bigger reach. Yeah, to answer the question for us, so when we plan an action at Animal Rebellion Netherlands, we always try to frame the messaging in a way that it incorporates both mandates. So, for example, last September Rebellion, we had a funeral procession that was mourning for all the victims of the animal agriculture, so including the planet, the people, and the animals. So we tried to do that. But really, depending on the target group, we might also either rather stress climate justice or animal justice more. So if we are collaborating with an animal rights movement, then we emphasize more on animal rights. And if it's an environmental movement, it's more on the climate. And the good thing is that, well, I think that regardless if you stress the one or the other, it will always help both causes, so the animals and our planet. So, because of course, if animal agriculture activities are stopped because of environmental reasons, then automatically the animals are being helped, and vice versa. And we also don't think there's a conflict actually between the mandates, because we're rebelling for all life, as also Eloisa and Alyssa already said, because ultimately climate justice is animal justice. It's the same thing, and life on Earth needs to survive. So human and non-human animals and plants, entire nature. And if climate justice is met, then automatically animal justice is met. And as long as we don't address the animal emergency, then we can also not solve climate emergency. And I think that's the message that we're trying to bring into the public discussion. That's what I have to say.
Thanks, Annalisa. And before we ask Harley to comment, I just want to comment on the wonderful work that Harley and the messaging team have been doing in really looking at the factors that shape and looking at research, and the work on messaging for Animal Rebellion has been extraordinary. And I just want to give a shout out and express my gratitude for that, and love to hear from Harley.
Thanks, Philip, so much. And thank you for being part of all of our messaging workshops. We do have a fantastic team behind the messaging who have put in a lot of hours. So thank you for acknowledging that. And just, before I start, I want to say I don't really think I can add much to this. Everyone has said such amazing things. It's fantastic to hear these different kind of perspectives from all around the world, and really agree with so much of what has been said. I think, when it comes down to it, it's so true that these issues are all connected. And I think, kind of going back to what you were saying, Philip, right at the start, of that kind of the tension that arises sometimes between like aiming, and I think it's always striving, no matter what area, whether it's personal or organizational, it's always striving to be anti-speciesist and trying to be as anti-speciesist as possible. And I think that's very true within Animal Rebellion. We're always, I see that as the guiding star, you know, it's what we're aiming towards, but we're living in an imperfect world. And I think the tension does arise because we want this plant-based food system, but a plant-based food system on its own isn't necessarily an anti-speciesist world, because, you know, we have so many other areas where humans and animals are exploited. And I think that's where this idea of like a just, sustainable plant-based food system comes in. And that's kind of, it's a phrase that we use a lot and that we are constantly trying to unpack at Animal Rebellion and in the messaging team all over the organization, of what does a just, sustainable world look like, where exploitation isn't a factor of the system. Exploitation isn't the way the system thrives. And I think it's something that we work on kind of constantly in all of our activism. And I think as well, I see that, and it's similar to what Elisa was saying about this idea of like an ecology of change, and that we're pushing for one idea of this future, this world, which is talking about climate justice and animal justice being linked, but we ultimately want to and aim to be, and already are in some elements, but we can, you know, always keep improving, to be working in harmony with justice movements all over the world, working on other issues. And I feel like in tandem, that's how we get to this just world. So I think I love Animal Rebellion and what we do and what we try and do all in different parts of the world, and trying to bring in these ideas of that animals are part of the conversation, and, you know, bringing that into the climate space. And that was a big reason that Animal Rebellion was founded, was that it was a missing piece of the climate movement, and it was an opportunity to bring animals into the conversation about climate justice. And I feel like that's started to happen a lot more, and I think that's really exciting. And I think it's an ongoing thing of creating these, you know, movement of movements where we're all connecting for this united goal of collective liberation, of justice for all. And like Annalisa said, we're rebelling. I think it was Annalisa, we're rebelling for all life. It might have been someone else. And I think for me, I see people within Animal Rebellion going out and doing other work with other organizations. And I think that's what inspires me and keeps me inspired, that we're doing all this stuff within Animal Rebellion with this climate justice idea, but that isn't stopping people. And I think what is special about Animal Rebellion in some ways, and I think other groups have it as well, is that we never stop people, and we never want to stop people from going out and acting for other causes as well. And we want to be supporting them as well, supporting those causes. And I think, you know, it's a great place. It's a training ground. It's a meeting place. It's a place where people can come together, as well as, you know, running our own campaigns and doing our own actions. I also see Animal Rebellion as this space for growth and innovation, where people can come and take part and then go away and take what they've learned to other spaces as well. And I think it's just this flowering of this whole movement of justice kind of coming together. So yeah, I'll finish there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add to what Harley was saying. You know, even within a plant-based food system, there is exploitation. And so I think that's something we rarely dive into. I mean, for the people who are not within that part of food justice work, the Food Empowerment Project does amazing work in order to really highlight what happens there and the exploitation. And we need to be aware of the fact that even beyond having other systems where animals and people are exploited within a plant-based system itself, there will be exploitation. And so there's a lot that we have to dismantle just beyond, hopefully one day, I don't know when, switching or, pushing the governments and hopefully people to really align with those ethics. During the pandemic and during this year, there were fires in California and there were people picking produce in California while this was happening. There's child farmers in the US, which most people don't know about. And these are children who may be 11 years old, 10 years old, because that is allowed. So when the policies were made, that was one way of allowing child labor and child exploitation right here in the US. And so I think people tend to look to the US as this sort of superpower. Well, it is an imperialist power for sure, but where perhaps people's labor rights are protected because we've had such a huge labor movement and so on. But that's not the case. People are exploited within our own food system, and a lot of that food is food that is already plant-based.
Yeah. Thanks, Eloisa. Just briefly, I just want to add kind of as a coda to this, a quote. I think, and both Holly and Eloisa touched on this, that there's injustice beyond the exploitation of animals, and that we need to really be aware of the impact that has on the people who are exploited, and I would add also on ourselves. It has an alienating effect that colors people. If one is involved in exploitation that can be avoided, and working to avoid that on a systems level is obviously the goal. It has a negative impact on the ability to see the world and be in the world as skillfully as possible. And I think that's really important, and why, for me, the any species' message is so crucial. And I'll just briefly share a quote from my fellow American moral philosopher by the name of John Sanborn Matsu. And he says, "Because we are animals ourselves, what, quote, we, unquote, do to, quote, them, unquote, we also do to ourselves. In oppressing our kin, we become estranged from ourselves, placing ourselves in perpetual flight from our own embodied, desiring, suffering, and, quote, potentially rational selves." So it's just so crucial beyond, I mean, the exploitation of other animals physically and directly with violence is obviously a major problem that we need to address. But exploitation more broadly, including animal exploitation, has such a deleterious impact on our ability to show up skillfully. So I think that's just why, for me, the anti-speciesist message is so crucially important, and was so grateful when, from the beginning, it was included with Animal Rebellion. So why don't we move to our next question? So brief comment in the question. As a global community, we're navigating an unprecedented challenge in the form of the COVID-19 pandemic, unprecedented in our lifetimes. In some parts of the world, including here in the United States, where I'm calling from, in the case of the tumultuous presidential election and subsequent transfer of power, additional socio-political and socio-economic challenges have arisen that further color our work as animal and environmental justice activists. It's a very complex situation we're living through. So the question, how has navigating the global pandemic and perhaps other factors in your home region shape the contours of your activism with Animal Rebellion, and if applicable, your animal and environmental activism more generally? So let's go in reverse order. Maybe we'll start with Harley and go around.
Sounds good. Yeah, no, I think it's a really important question. And I think in a lot of ways, I feel like COVID has made Animal Rebellion stronger, while also being an extreme challenge. And of course, this is a situation that is horrendous for for so many people, especially the most marginalized people are being the most affected. And there's a report that came out recently called Framing Climate Justice. It was a study done in the UK about attitudes towards climate change, and more specifically towards climate justice. And I think what they were saying in that was it was done before COVID and also before like Black Lives Matter uprising in the summer. And they were talking about those two instances and how these kind of findings were relevant. And one thing that they said was that a big challenge that we've struggled with is to show people the links and the connections between colonialism, between capitalism and climate crisis. And they were saying that in a way, like these awful events have provided a window of people being able to see that, like, how this system is what's kind of toxic. And I think that's been, it's been kind of an opening in a way to be able to see people make those connections for a time when the system breaks visibly. It provides that opportunity for people to see how the system is broken, I think. And also internally, I know in the UK, we've really had to shift the way we do things a lot, because, Animal Rebellion was founded on a theory of change of mass nonviolent civil disobedience. Right. So, of course, when the pandemic started, that became essentially impossible. So we really, but I think and that's where I come back to this idea of it making us stronger in a way, because we started incorporating different theories of change, different ways of being, which I think has opened us up and opened the minds of people in the organization as well to see the amazing work that's being done all over the world, things like mutual aid, things like, working within communities. So I've seen a real reinvigoration of our local groups, which has especially come out of a campaign that we're running, which is around local councils. So people are engaging with their local councils to get them to serve like only plant-based meals, which may seem like a small step, but on like a scale of across the UK, it's quite significant. And also, it's also really empowering local communities to see that they can make an impact in their towns, in their homes. And that's been quite incredible to see people really rise up and get behind this campaign. And if anyone's listening who wants to be part of that campaign, please check out the website. There's more details there, the Animal Rebellion website and our Facebook page, of course. Little plug. But yeah, so I have seen some reinvigoration of that more grassroots form of activism, which I think has always been there, of course. But within Animal Rebellion, because we were so focused on rebellions, it became a little bit diluted in that it was kind of like waiting for the call to action. People were waiting for the next rebellion when they would all come to London, and then storm the streets for a week or two and then go home afterwards and wait for the next call to action. And I've really seen people kind of taking up the call, I guess, in their own place and in their specific context, which has led to more connecting with other groups who are working on different issues and similar issues. It's led to things like developing our messaging more deeply and more collaboratively. It's led to more collaborative processes in general. We just finished in the UK a month-long strategy consultation, which has led to developing goals and priorities for the year ahead, which has come completely, as much as we could, collaboratively from the whole organization in the UK. So I think it's been an extraordinary challenge, and it's also been a wake-up call for a lot of people to see how, especially like marginalized people, which including animals, are being the most affected while being the least responsible for all these things that are happening in the world, all these crises. But I think I see us coming out of it stronger. I see us coming out of it more connected globally. And I see us coming out of it with this expanded vision of all the different knowledge and skills we can utilize to move forward and bring about change. I think that's really exciting.
Wonderful. Thanks, Harley. Annalisa, would you care to comment?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Harley. I think this has been a special time, and not only negative, I would say, because we learned a lot during this time. You have to get very creative with your actions also. So in the Netherlands, luckily we could and we can continue with demonstrations. That's why we also had a September rebellion last year, luckily. But we noticed that it's getting more difficult with getting permissions for marches. We had 2 marches during our September rebellion last year, and the city didn't want us to really walk through the city, but more outside where nobody can see us, because they said it's too crowded in the city. So yeah, these kind of things also happen. Yeah, we're trying to think of demonstrations and actions that are COVID proof, because obviously we don't want to put anyone at risk. That's very important. Also because you get an extremely bad media coverage if you do that. But also, yeah, we just want to keep people safe. Yeah, and it's definitely a challenge. Once you plan an action, you really have to think twice. Okay, can we do this? Is this COVID proof? And usually also during the rebellions, there is a camping happening, like a campsite for community building and preparing actions. And these kind of things, just get really difficult in COVID times. So we noticed that we need to get very creative and even more strategic to find ways to do activism in this time, because we feel that in this time where everybody is just focusing on COVID, and every day in the news is just COVID, 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 which is important to talk about, but we cannot forget to continue talking about animal justice and climate justice. I think it takes a lot of creativity and like think about strategy. But what we notice also in the Netherlands that, well, we've been now on this on and off lockdown for about a year, and but people are ready to go on the streets again. They can't stay at home anymore. They really want to do something. So and our plan for this year is also not only to get on the streets ourselves, but really cooperate with other environmental movements. There's a climate march coming up in March, which is nationally, so in the Netherlands, and a lot of different movements are going to join this march, and that's going to be quite interesting. And hopefully there can be a spring rebellion. We need to see, but it's definitely a challenge. But we're looking forward to this challenge.
Thanks, Annalisa. Simon, would you care to share some comments?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I guess in my activism or in our group, there were some bad points, kind of, because, for example, as Annalisa said, we had kind of the same situation that our city wouldn't let us into the city center, but they used pandemic measures as excuses, like, no, that's not a good place to be, and just go outside somewhere. And it had no foundation at all. So we had to come with a lawyer and whatever. So in the end it worked, but it made things more difficult. And on the other hand, we had issues, I guess, like everywhere in the world, people from QAnon, for example, or different conspiracy theories. Of course, we're not protected from everywhere. So we have people in our organizations who believe different things, and then COVID came into the discussion, and we started discussing things in our group about COVID and pandemic and measures and whatever, and this kind of brought us away from our actual goal of animal rights activism. So that were the bad points, I guess. But on the other hand, maybe I'm too positive, but as Harley said, the communication really improved. And for me, as an example, I have never ever used like Zoom or whatever online communication tools at all before. And now I'm in there every second day or whatever, just to talk to different animal rights groups and learning stuff from all over the world. And as well in Germany in general, the connection between the different local groups really improved. So for me, it feels like a long preparation time. And as soon as this preparation time ends, there will be loads of mass demonstrations and whatever we wish of. So maybe I'm too positive in this way, but that's what it feels like for me right now. Like a long preparation, online running stuff, get to know each other, and then be on the street together and really bring up some change. So yeah.
Thanks,
That's it.
Simon. Thank you. Elisa, you're back. Can you comment? Definitely interested. I know you're very active in Canada and how this, situation has impacted not only Animal Rebellion, but a lot of the other work that you do.
Okay, my connection is really bad. Can you hear me?
Can hear you fine.
Hello?
Yep, we can
Okay.
hear you. The picture's a little bit choppy.
Okay. So for here, what it has done, it's really hard to go out, and it's been for a while. And I think in terms of avoiding unnecessary suffering also on the side of people who could get the virus, the overall direction was to stay at home, specifically that we have lockdowns and we have even curfews. People are getting very stressed, and as Harley said it well, I mean, the people who are the least responsible and the minorities are facing really big hardships, economical hardships, social and mental hardships. So we don't want to push that more on people. So respecting that boundary, that's why we've been trying to do slow work and to work more online. And I found that it's hard. Honestly, it's really hard to, obviously, no one decided to suffer from the impact of the pandemic. And once again, this just shows the connection between our ravaging of the environment and the way animal agriculture plays a big role in this and the emergence of pandemics. But it's not a time just to obviously it's sad, but we have to deal with it. And I've read something which I found very useful. So I took that time, and a few people here in Canada, we tried to take the time to just learn and obviously also follow trainings, but mostly learn. I think it seems crazy. We would think, well, whatever, we're always learning, but there's kind of this culture here of fast pace, even in Animal Rebellion, where we're focused more on systemic change. There's kind of this work culture of doing actions that actually, in a sense, sometimes it's not always optimal, in a sense that there's lots of knowledge in terms of social change that we need to learn. And there's lots of knowledge also in terms of messaging, because it's so important, the story-based strategy and how we organize. For obviously we can't organize any actions right now, but if there's online actions, it's so important. It's not just the message, it's how we bring the content. So that has helped us go in more in that direction. And one interesting element that I've read from the INE Institute, I really highly recommend. They talk about lots of social change approach. They were talking about the notion of seasons in a metaphorical sense. We have seasons, real seasons, but in activism, we have seasons. And seasons refer to time, for example, summer, a time where the speed of things we do is higher, the amount of work is bigger, the work that we do is more, quote unquote, in the forefront, so in the streets. Whereas, for example, in winter, what we call metaphorically winter, it's more slow pace. We can't necessarily achieve as many successes like that as fast, but it's more about underground, long-term preparation, of the structure of the organization, of the culture of the organization. And we often see times where we slow down because it's also part of the global culture as, oh my God, something's wrong, right? We have to go back to normal. We have to go back to speed. We have to go back in the streets. We have to do it for the animals. Obviously, we have to do something for the animals, but sometimes it can be in their favor and in the favor of humans too, and the environment, to be able just to take a step back and acknowledge the season. Because sometimes when we misdiagnose our season, I think that right now, at least in Turtle Island, Canada, we are in a season of winter. We're physically in winter, metaphorically in winter, and a season can go way longer than a real season. It could be a year, it could be 6 months. So just to be aware in which season you are helps you just not take too much on yourself, not take too much stress. And also, if you think you're in a summer season, but we're in a winter season, you may feel that you want to push others to do more. You may feel that. So it really brings a toll on the overall culture. So to be able to accept our season and to go with it and to learn that in every season there is a plus, I think, they explain it way better than I do. You can look online, INI Institute and Seasons. Another
Thank
thing,
you, Lisa.
I talked to, thank you.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Elisa.
Yeah,
we're closing in on the top of the hour, and I just want to make sure everyone gets a chance to chime in on all the questions. So thank you. And could you spell ANI? Is it AYNI? Is that right? AYNI Institute?
Yes.
For folks, yes.
It's probably INI. Sorry, INI.
INI. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Eloisa, in the time we have left, if you could comment, that would be wonderful. I know it's getting to the top of the hour.
Tim just said we can carry on for 5 minutes, so I will answer the question fully.
Oh, great. Thank you.
I think it's important for me to answer this question. And, just to what Alyssa was saying, I'm familiar with the work, and I just want to say everyone had a different season during this pandemic. And so for those of us that perhaps were in a season of winter, that was a privilege. Not everybody was able to do that. So this has been probably the busiest time, the most challenging time for people who were already fighting for equity. You're talking about Black people, Afro-descendants, Indigenous people. While Black Lives Matter was going on, Indigenous people were fighting for their rights globally, in the US as well. Pipelines are being built not only through Indigenous land, but right here through the city, through further occupied Indigenous land. During this pandemic in New York, the Animal Rebellion team, I think back to what Harley was saying, there was a lot of perhaps more awareness of how issues are interconnected. We did have 2 really great actions. We had a march connecting the pandemic to animal exploitation, where we marched throughout the city in the middle of the street. It was great. We also had a moment of silence in front of the hospitals. And we also did the Webble Lies action, just to really show how, these governments and the media obviously withholds information from us. But getting away from that and more towards, what we've experienced for Vegan Activist Alliance, we actually were founded during the pandemic, which for me just has been an incredible journey. We had a certain administration here, so we were getting information a little bit delayed. I knew there was something going on as far as early January. So our work continued. And when things did start getting shut down, because New York's such a specific part of the world, the BLM uprisings here were substantial. So although we did have closings as far as businesses, people were out on the street from the beginning of the pandemic to the middle and so on. We did still continue to have actions for Vegan Activist Alliance by, following guidelines and so forth. For Chili's on Wheels, that's when I started pandemic relief efforts. So, we have had meal shares. And so we have been already within that community. And for us, since we have been within that community, it didn't feel inadequate or disingenuous to continue furthering the message of liberating animals. And so I think that that's the benefit when you're already there, because you have been fighting for so long. And so that's what we see within our circles. I mean, we are used to doing mutual aid. To us, this wasn't anything new. It expanded obviously further. New York has, I believe, the largest mutual aid network in the world. The Economist just wrote an article about it. Not an article that I was happy with. I felt that they could have done a better job. But everybody really did come together. So for marginalized communities, this is the way we have survived, because we have had to deal with fighting for our own liberation for so long, especially, due to colonialism. And I'm not just talking specifically to the US. I mean, Europe colonized 84% of the world. So just want to make that clear that there are indigenous people all over that are fighting for the same things that Black and indigenous people are fighting for here. So we have been the busiest that we have ever been. We were providing jail support to Black Lives Matter protesters. So the mutual aid, we would bring the food. We were doing the pandemic relief. We still are. And continuing to do the work that we were doing previously. Vegan Activist Alliance, I brought in my team to help do that. And so while we were doing other types of activism, we were also doing food relief. And I thought it was important for my team to understand that if we're going to talk about how things are interconnected and about inclusivity, that we have to do the work. It can't be this theoretical framework that we tend to discuss. And I think when we talk about things have been revealed, they haven't been revealed to us. People who are in a privileged position are finding themselves perhaps in the situation to discuss these things and kind of understanding how they are interconnected. One of my main issues, I think that many of times it stays within that discourse, right? Sort of within academia, and we're going to read 10 more books and, we're going to discuss it amongst ourselves, right? Without actually engaging the community that you are speaking about. And I think that that's what's important. I think that we have to, as animal rights activists, if we are talking about liberation, we have to put in liberation praxis. It cannot stay within just theory. If we are activists, right? Perhaps your activism is within that. But if we are doing other work on the ground, then we have to include other work on the ground there as well, especially during a challenging time like the pandemic, which changes everything. For me, I think it has been one of the times that I was the most exhausted and the busiest out of my entire life. And so when I saw other activists who pulled back, and obviously we are all experiencing a pandemic differently. We're all in the sea, but we're all kind of navigating a different boat. It was challenging to see that, right? And I think, and I don't want to be ableist. There's people who can't come out. There's people who are ill. There's people who have family members, and they have to take every precaution with it, within this sort of virus that, while we have some knowledge of, we don't know that much about. But for those who have the privilege, who perhaps are able-bodied, who were not living at home with anybody else, who perhaps could have helped, to have sat there while animals and humans are suffering because their only way to do activism was to talk to people on the street, and they have never at all thought about how things are interconnected, and that perhaps this was an opportunity to do something differently, and still help animals and still help people in the process. I have to say that was very disheartening for me as a person who had the complete opposite experience of that. And, hopefully the conversations will expand outside of academia and those circles, and, the theoretical framework, and apply the praxis. I think that's really important.
Eloisa, thanks so much for weighing in. I know how, being in New York, how active you've been at many levels and in many fronts, and it's truly inspiring, and just want to express my appreciation and my appreciation to all the panelists and the way you all showed up today. Thanks so much. And a special thanks, again, I mentioned it earlier, from the very beginning, Tim Barford at VegFest UK has been a champion for Animal Rebellion in the face of criticism and challenges to that decision. So I just want to say, our appreciation as Animal Rebellion for that advocacy and championing the organization, and for staying the course online in this situation back to the pandemic where you're not able to meet with the Olympia, the big events in the Olympia and what have you, and that you're staying the course. So thank you all, and thank you, Tim, for having us. This has been fantastic.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
You're muted.
Oh, you're muted too.
It's really interesting to hear these little snapshots, and it is a real pleasure to be involved a little bit with Animal Rebellion because it's so fresh and it's global, and it's the first animal organisation. I should say, I've been doing this like 40 years now, and this is the first animal organisation that I've been listening to that is really listening to itself and taking on board stuff, taking the knocks and learning. And you guys come in for so much criticism a couple of years ago, so much of it that was so unsupportive. And to listen on a couple of years now, every time we get to talk, this is, I think, the fourth time, Philip, isn't it? We've been doing this. Harley, I know you was on last time. Simon, it's really refreshing to hear this stuff. And Annalisa, it's just brilliant. But I think, Annalisa, to have you lead at times, and that's what I'm hearing. And Amawali asked me earlier, what did I think, really? I thought, you know what? We want to hear more voices leading these discussions that we can sit and listen from and learn from. And let's make space amongst us as ours in our organisations. And really listen and do what you said there, is to take some action. And that's challenged me, that's made me think, for sure. And that's a really good thing, is to keep challenging ourselves to grow and become better and do it. And I'm thrilled. I'm honoured. So thank you, folks. Thank you ever so much for coming in. We're going to probably, do some of those snapshots, some sound bites, and put them out. Try and share them during February, especially, and especially with all the interesting plant-based diets. Great to fill in some gaps and put some really good, solid little sound chunks there. And Philip, thank you especially very much, because you stepped in last minute once again. Put all this together, such a professional job. You make it look easy, but I know it takes years of experience. But no, it's a pleasure. It's such a pleasure to work with you, all of you. Thank you too.
Thank
and I
you.
know there's one or two others who popped up.
To all, animalrebellion.org on the web. To get involved, please visit the website, Facebook group.
And we're going to be continuing this. Philip knows already there's some plans afoot from the VegFest team. We're going to be taking something forward. We've got a really interesting new project to announce in a couple of weeks, but it's going to involve Animal Rebellion. We're just beginning to talk about it. It's a little bit under wraps, as I say, but we'll be in touch, as I say. And I'm sure we'll be doing another online event too before too long. So on that note, this is it. That's our last little bit for the VegFest UK Online January 30th, 31st, 2021 series. Thanks ever so much, Animal Rebellion. Thank you all. Thanks for listening, and we will be in touch again. Have a great time. Cheers, folks.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Tim.